You ever have one of those moments where you just, no, someone picked the wrong fight? Yeah. Brenda, our HOA president, learned that lesson the hard way, but not before putting my family through the suburban version of DEFCON 1 over, of all things, the color of our fence. I swear if you'd told me a few months ago that moving into a quiet lake cabin was going to land us in the middle of a neighborhood Cold War, I'd have laughed you out of the room. But here we are, and man, what a story. Let me set the scene. My name's David Miller, 38 software guy, more comfortable with code than confrontation. My wife Sarah is the real reason we moved out to Seneca Falls. She'd landed what she called a leadership gig, and my daughter Lily was just thrilled to finally have a yard instead of running into apartment walls every 5 seconds. The place was perfect. Old couple owned it for decades, never a peep of HOA trouble. When they handed us the keys, they smiled and said, "It's peaceful here, the HOA's thorough, but you'll be fine." Guess we should have caught the warning in that, but we were too busy falling in love with the view and the wraparound porch. Sarah was oddly cagey about her job leadership community work, making sure folks follow the rules. She'd say, always with that look like she was hiding the punchline of some cosmic joke. But honestly, I was so relieved to be out of the city, I didn't press too hard. I figured she was just happy not to have to deal with our old HOA president who once fined us for a visibly wrinkled flag. So day 2, still unpacking, when I spot this woman in a white blazer at the edge of our property, taking pictures of our house like she's casing it for a heist. "Can I help you?" I ask, and she turns with that tight politician's smile. "Brenda Carlson, HOA president. Welcome to Lakewood Estates." She looked like she color-coded her sock drawer. "Just standard documentation for new residents," she said, like we were joining the world's strictest club. Now here's the thing about Brenda. 3 years ago, someone broke into her house during book club. Nothing major stolen, but it broke something inside her. She channeled all that fear into becoming HOA president, inventing rules, cataloging every offense, and treating the neighborhood like her personal kingdom. The neighbors, terrified not physically, but because Brenda had the power to make your life miserable with fines, public shaming, and legal threats over things like improper mailbox symmetry. So right off the bat, she tells us navy blue isn't an approved fence color, guidelines require white beige or natural wood. I'd checked the HOA docs before painting, and there was no mention of color anywhere. Brenda just smirks, says it's in the supplemental guidelines and that we've got 30 days to repaint or it's a $200 fine. Through the kitchen window, I spot Sarah watching posture, all alert like she's sizing up a suspect. Brenda starts picking apart our landscaping, too much overgrowth, not enough border, the whole 9 yards. It felt less like helpful neighborly advice and more like a low-budget home inspection from hell. "We literally just moved in," I say, but she's unfazed, quoting property values like she's reading from the gospel. Sarah steps out all calm and friendly, but with that undertone that says she's ready for battle. "Why don't you let me chat with Brenda David?" She shoos me off to unpack, but I linger, eavesdropping just enough to realize Sarah is asking some pretty pointed questions about meeting minutes, voting procedures, authority to levy fines. The kind of questions that make a control freak nervous. After Brenda leaves, Sarah pours herself another cup of coffee, thoughtful. She's not just a control freak, she's terrified. And smart. She knows exactly how far she can push before crossing a line, and she needs people to not just follow the rules, but submit. It was the first time I wondered if Brenda was going to be a bigger problem than I thought. So day 5, trying to play nice, I start repainting the fence white. Brenda shows up clicking down the driveway in her heels, waving around noise ordinances and recording me sanding at 10 in the morning. Claims she's had 3 complaints already. Yeah, right. I'm starting to see what Sarah meant. Brenda wasn't just enforcing the rules, she was the rules, and any challenge to her authority was met with a mountain of paperwork and invented violations. A couple days later, I decide to try the peace offering route, bring Brenda a bottle of wine, smile, big ask if we can start over. She invites me in, and her living room is like NORAD for HOA enforcement maps files, surveillance logs, the works. She shows me our file already 2 inches thick, full of photos, notes, a literal dossier. Compliance and respect for the process, she tells me, is all I want. But it's clear Sarah's already gotten under her skin. Then comes the first formal violation notice, 3 infractions, $450 in fines, all for stuff Brenda can't actually prove we did wrong. I show Sarah, and she's all business, reading every line, then tells me to check the real HOA documents at the county clerk's office. Turns out Brenda's rules mostly made up no votes, no legal standing, just a paper trail of intimidation. When Sarah writes Brenda a response, it's like watching a lawyer prepping for court, polite, meticulous, and absolutely devastating. A few days later, Brenda is practically pacing holes in her front yard folders clutched like she's expecting the feds to show up. She demands a meeting with Sarah, even calls an emergency HOA gathering to address violations of community guidelines. The night of the place is packed, neighbors Brenda, with a PowerPoint, Sarah dressed all professional, and me just hoping nobody throws a chair. Brenda starts with the photos, the rules, all her usual spiel. But Sarah, she's ready. Calmly asks for proof of the rules, points out the law requires a homeowner vote for any changes, and asks Brenda to produce documentation. Silence. No votes, just Brenda's word against the real legal documents which Sarah has printed out, annotated, and cross-referenced. You could feel the room shifting, people realizing they'd been paying fines for made-up rules. Then Sarah lays it out. What Brenda's done isn't just overreach, it's fraud. Collecting money under false pretenses, enforcing rules that don't exist, serious stuff. Brenda turns ghost white, tries to bluster, threatens to call the police, and Sarah just leans in and says, Brenda, please do. In fact, I'll wait while you call. A few days later, we throw a barbecue to actually meet our neighbors, the first real community event in years, thanks to Brenda's reign of terror. Everyone's having a good time, kids playing music, nothing rowdy. Of course, Brenda's on her porch filming us taking notes. Next thing I know, she's calling 911, claims there's a rager, drugs, public intoxication, you name it. There's not a hint of truth to it, but she's desperate. Cops show up professional, just doing their job. But the moment the sergeant sees Sarah, he stops dead. Chief Miller, he says. Turns out my wife, the one Brenda's been harassing nonstop, is the new chief of police for the entire town. The way Brenda's face dropped from the porch, I'll never forget it. The cop walks over to Brenda, asks her about the complaint, and you can see her realize just how badly she's miscalculated. But Brenda, bless her, doesn't let go easy. She calls 911 again and again, claims Sarah's impersonating an officer, abusing power, running some kind of intimidation racket. At this point, it's harassment, plain and simple. Sarah finally marches over in full uniform, badge and all, and reads Brenda. Her rights, charges her with filing false police reports, abuse of emergency services, the works. In front of the whole neighborhood, Brenda gets cuffed and put in a squad car. You ever see justice served so cold it gives you goosebumps? Yeah, that happened. A week later, Brenda's house is up for sale. The HOA's under new management, and people are actually talking to each other again. Sarah, meanwhile, is helping folks get their illegally collected money back and making sure nobody ever pulls a Brenda again. The difference between authority used to control and authority used to protect, it's everything. So yeah, sometimes the person you try to intimidate turns out to be the one who can end your little reign of terror for good. If this story hit a nerve or just made you laugh, let me know in the comments. Ever dealt with a Karen or a power-hungry HOA? Drop your story below. Maybe I'll turn it into the next episode. And hey, don't forget, justice always finds a way, especially when you least expect it.